Next up in our ACC preview is the Pittsburgh Panthers. And Dalton, there's no way to sugarcoat this, man. It was a disaster last year for the Panthers. They went 3-9. They went 20-7 across 2021 and 2022, and they won an ACC championship in one of those 2 years as well under Kenny Pickett. But 3-9 this past year, their worst record in the 21st century, man. It was a disaster for Pitt. Had one of the 10 lowest graded offenses in the country, averaging just 20 points per game. They do have some optimism on that side of the ball. A new offensive coordinator in Cade Bell from Western Carolina. And very solid play, I will say, from Nate Yarnell when he was on the field for them. But they should still have a lot of major question marks defensively and with that offensive line we'll talk about in just a second. But what is the biggest strength of the Panthers right now, Dalton, do you think?
So they've struggled to score, since Kenny Pickett left. But at least this year they've got some guys coming back, especially at receiver, where you lost Bub Means, but you got your other three top receivers back. And you've got Rodney Hammond, your leading rusher, coming back. So, and we've seen Nate Yarnell, at least in a small sample, play well, They've got enough of a core where you could this year go, okay, they've got some experience. You've got a new-ish quarterback who's played before, but they do need to block better up front. If they can score a little bit more, because Coach Narduzzi always has this defense, looking respectable at least, right, especially in the secondary. But they have to score more points than they have the last couple of years. At the very least, they've got an experienced group that hopefully will be able to do that.
Yeah, and the one really big issue is their offensive line on offense, man. They really made it difficult to get anything going last year. They're the second lowest graded offensive line last year in the Power 5, and they didn't really do much in the portal to fix that issue either, right? So the offensive line was terrible last year, and unless they get some significant improvement, which is possible, right? College players always seem to improve year after year, but they need significant improvement from that offensive line to just not tank that offense like it did last year. But tell me more about Nate Yarnell, Dalton. We saw 3 career starts for him last year, a little bit of his action as well. What should we expect from him as the full-time starter for Pitt now?
Yeah, and honestly, he's performed pretty well. Those 3 starts, across those starts, he's got an 80 passing grade. So he was at least, useful to them, more so than some of the other guys that they've played over the last 2 years. And the biggest thing is he's a true pocket passer. He doesn't have a big arm, despite, I believe he's got a 6'5" or 6'6" frame. Moves a little bit, can throw a little bit on the move. The big thing with him is that he throws with timing and touch, especially in like that 15 to 25-yard range. Those are where his best throws come in. You're not going to see him sling 60, 70-yard balls down the field. He's going to live in that 15 to 30-yard range, and especially off of play action. He's got a 93.4 play action passing grade in the time he's played so far at Pitt. So they're another team. They want to run the ball. They want to get to their play action game. They don't want to drop back too much because they don't have elite weapons or even an elite quarterback. But Yarnell can be useful to them, right? There's not a whole lot of improv with his game. I feel like I've said this about half the ACC quarterbacks so far, but he's another one. He's a pocket passer. He can make the throws. He can work play action, get the run game going, and he could be a decent starter.
Yeah, and one of his top weapons, and probably the top weapon they have now, Bub Means leaving, is Konata Mumpfield, their number 2 receiver. He was the number 2 receiver in each of the last 2 years for Pitt. Had 575 yards this past season. Since 2022, he has 1,129 receiving yards. That is 813 more than the next closest returning receiver on the team in Dejon Reynolds, man. So clearly the top option now in that passing game for Nate Yarnell. Talented route runner, reliable hands, only dropped about 4% of his catchable targets in his career. So I like Mumpfield, man. I think, he's been the number 2 guy for them in each of the last 2 years. I think this year is when he's going to emerge as the number 1 receiver for Pitt this year.
Yeah, and if the theme is taken over for graduates, Pitt lost their starting 3 linebackers, but they've got a decent one coming up in Brandon George, and played just under 300 snaps last season, but posted an 81.1 overall grade when he was on the field. And that's 3rd best in the ACC behind Jeremiah Trotter and Peyton Wilson. So when you're getting up into the company of those guys who were getting drafted and really honestly should have been drafted a lot higher than they were, Brandon George really needs to make himself the centerpiece of this linebacking core and this front 7 in order for the front 7 to not, fall apart losing all these veterans.
Yeah, it's kind of the same story with him, right? Mumpfield's kind of getting an increased role. George getting an increased role. So I'm excited to see what they could do this upcoming season. All right, Don, bottom line time now. Pat Narduzzi probably on the hot seat. What's the minimum for him to keep his job at Pitt, and what are you expecting out of the Panthers this year?
They probably need to make a bowl game and maybe 5-7 with some progress saves. And part of it depends on how Yarnell and the offense looks, because I think that's been the biggest thing over the last 2 years is just they have not been able to score, right? They've tried transfer quarterbacks. Phil Jerkovich was a guy that came in there and just kind of couldn't piece it together. They need to score more points for sure. They just cannot. And Pat Narduzzi is a fantastic defensive coach, but they can't try to go out there winning games 17-13 every week. So they need either a bowl game, I think would do it for sure, or at least some sort of tangible improvement on offense. If it's Yarnell playing the whole season, they just need to find some points to give themselves a chance to win more games.
Yeah, I mean, look at their schedule right now. It's manageable, man. I mean, they have right now the sixth easiest schedule in the ACC according to our power rankings. They play Kent State, Cincinnati, West Virginia is a tough non-conference game, but Youngstown State. So 3 of the 4 they should win, or at least Cincinnati they should be competitive in. So they could win 3 of their non-con games. They avoid Miami. They play Virginia. They play Boston College. Yeah, I think a bowl game is possible. I don't know if I'm expecting a bowl game out of them this year. They're gonna have to. They're gonna need Nate Yarnell to really expand on what was an impressive, games that we saw from him, and also find any sort of consistency up front, offensively and defensively. Because remember, Deion Hayes, one of their top edge players, he's gone too, right? So they need some help on the defensive line, need some help in that offensive line. They need better trench play and Nate Yarnell to really expand on what was an impressive showing from him when he was on the field for the Panthers last year. But that's what we got for our preview of the Pittsburgh Panthers. Hey, thanks for watching the PFF College Football Show. Before I let you go, though, we have an unbelievable deal for you guys right now. If you use the code CFB25, you get 25% off your PFF Plus annual subscription. We've got the 2024 College Football Preview Guide that you can find over at pff.com, featuring the best players in the country from all 70 Power 5 teams, plus 10 Group of 5 teams that have the best chance at making the college football playoff as well. You can also gain access to NCAA premium stats for historical games, teams, and player tracking dating all the way back to 2014, so the last decade or so of college football. All the stats you can hope for, you can find in PFF Premium as well. Also, you can be the GM of your favorite NFL team with our unbelievable mock draft simulator where you can draft up to 7 rounds of players for your NFL team. And if you want to dominate your fantasy league, you can do that as well using the best fantasy tools on the planet. All of that and more with your PFF Plus annual subscription, which you can find for 25% off right now with the code you can find in the description. Or if you want to go to subscribe.pff.com and use the code CFB25 at checkout. Again, you get 25% off your PFF Plus subscription. This won't last forever, so make sure you take advantage of it right now.